I'm sure you've all noticed by now, Scott Snyder wants to get the word out about Absolute Batman and the Absolute Universe and DC all in, his big return to DC Comics. We haven't really seen him in several years, really since Dark Knight's Death Metal was the last really big thing that he did. And I don't really remember him doing anything after that. And I must be honest, I think Scott Snyder's reputation with DC fans is secure, because I do think Black Mirror is probably the best modern Batman story that we've gotten, that he did in Detective Comics with Dick Grayson as Batman. Absolutely haunting stuff. Great art from Jock. The bigger Batman story is still Court of Owls. That's the one that's probably going to be like enduring sales and stuff. But I still think Black Mirror is better. But Court of Owls brought in some new lore, some new blood into Batman, which was greatly needed at the time, brought in new villains that they're using in all types of different media. And he does have the last big event from DC Comics that probably worked, Dark Knight's Metal. Not Death Metal, because I don't think that worked at all. That people genuinely seemed to enjoy, had some good spinoffs, and had really good sales to it. But if you want to think about Scott Snyder's reputation as of late with DC fans, it's not particularly good. I don't think Batman Last Night on Earth was a good send-off for him with Batman. I don't think that was a good story. The first issue was good. The next two absolutely sucked. I don't think people liked Year of the Villain, his big initiatives that interrupted a ton of great stories for no reason whatsoever, other than Scott Snyder needed to go dark with DC Comics once again. And then he did have Dark Knight's Death Metal, which was an enormous wet fart, in a church. It just was unwanted, unwelcome. It stunk to high hell. It was so uncreative. That was the worst part about it. What if Batman was a castle? Like, that was the big concept in that one. We've got Absolute Universe coming up. We know that Scott Snyder is going to be the figurehead of that. He recently had an AMA on Reddit. And while there's not a ton of new information in there, not lots of breaking news on this one, basically, hey, Batman is not going to be a man of means. He's going to be enormous. He's going to grow up in Crime Alley. His childhood friends are typical rogues in the DC Prime universe, that kind of stuff. His mom works in the mayor's office. The really general things that we've had. But he did give some insight into his leadership style and some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I thought was interesting. We're going to cover that now. First up, talking about his approach to oversight regarding the Absolute Universe, being the showrunner. This is what he had to say on the AMA. I'm not really showrunning in the true sense. I wrote the story with Josh to create the world, define the ethos, and then helped approach some creators with editorial. But the goal was to be hands-off. That's how I always tried to run events like Night of the Owls, whatever. Give creators a basic starting point. The character has to feel exciting, new. You have to be passionate about the take, but it also has to be true to the core, not breaking of the DNA, so that the whole world feels coherent, and then let them work their magic. So I read the pitches for the characters, but it was more like creators just spitballing, helping each other out. And I believe this is an enormous flaw regarding his approach to managing the Ultimate Universe. We went out there and we got Jason Aaron on Absolute Superman. We got Kelly Thompson on Absolute Wonder Woman. We've also got Al Ewing, Dennis Camp, Pinsett Porchiotti, Jeff Lemire, and some other creators coming in there. But after the fiasco that was Dark Knight's Death Metal that stained his reputation, and after Year the Villain, which also stained his reputation, he hasn't had a big hit in a very long time. And then also after DC failed with Future State, oh my God, Infinite Frontier, Dawn of DC, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, Lazarus Planet, looks like Absolute Power is not a big sales earner either. DC aren't in a good place when it comes to trust with fans. And when you have creators like Jason Aaron and Kelly Thompson taking a complete hands-off approach after thinking, yeah, that's a pretty decent take on the character or a good concept for it, is the wrong approach. There are lots of different leadership approaches that you can take. And I personally, when I was a senior NCO in the United States Air Force, I wasn't really a micromanager per se, but when the stakes were high, the deadline was in our sights, and we knew it was going to somebody that was very, very important. you're damn right it got more oversight because it warranted that kind of oversight. And for Scott to take a more laissez-faire approach to allowing these other creators to just cook because it's Jason, Aaron, and Kelly Thompson is bad juju. If I'm being completely honest, Kelly Thompson doesn't have original ideas that are good. She needs someone overlooking her and making sure that she's not screwing up her story. Go read Birds of Prey if you want to see wall-to-wall gobbledygook that absolutely means nothing and you don't even know what the story is about at this point. And it's been out for over a year. I think we're coming up on a year and a half for Birds of Prey, and it's absolutely unreadable at this point. Jason Aaron is a far more competent, creative writer than Kelly Thompson. Needs less oversight, certainly, but he's also got some very, very, very destructive tendencies to him when it comes to these characters, to where they don't exactly fit into his exact vision, and he likes to break stuff to his vision. And I already know what his concept for Absolute Superman is, and it doesn't really have the DNA of Superman. It's not even Clark Kent. You kind of miss the entire point on the character. And taking this, let's let him cook approach, I think is bad timing and not the right way to go about this. And it's an enormous flaw that will likely see the longevity of Absolute Universe be shortened, and they immediately leave Superman and Wonder Woman, but they kind of just stick around for Batman. Can Batman sustain an entire universe by himself? I don't think so. Also coming out of the AMA, people ask, what can they expect from All In #1? It's a literal flip book. You can read it from either side. One side is from Darkseid's POV, and the other is from Superman's. They meet in the middle in this explosive moment, but Darkseid's side is all about him realizing during absolute power that something has been hidden from him all along, a truth, and he goes on a rampaging quest to find the truth about the universe, himself, all of it at all costs. If Darkseid's side is about needing to stand alone, Superman's side is about needing to stand together. Ultimately, the story is about the point of the whole initiative. Darkseid believes he needs to become the ender of all things. The heroes need to band together, honor the past, and also find new ways of moving forward in order to survive and thrive. It's going to be a flip book. You're going to be able to look at one cover, turn it over, and you're going to be able to read the other side. If you're Sully in Boston, you turn it into a drinking game with a Guinness. You flip it, and then you have a drink, and then you flip it, and you have a drink, and you enjoy it because it's a flip book, and it reminds him of being 8 years old again. And I don't have a personal problem with flip books. Scott Snyder's probably biggest obstacle to doing another great Batman story is himself, because he always feels like the only way you can tell a bigger Batman story than Black Mirror is to do Court of Owls, and the only way to do a bigger Batman or DC story than Court of Owls is to do Dark Knight's Metal. And the only way to do a bigger story than Dark Knight's Metal is to go to Dark Knight's Death Metal. And he's always wanting to go bigger and bigger and bigger, go further and further back in time and create stuff that was never there, that is now discovered and changes how we look at the entire universe, not really realizing that the universe was fine to begin with. You just needed to recontextualize or look at the character or add a new adversary to really make it exciting. And I personally think, and I've read a lot of Scott Snyder comic books, that the smaller he goes, the more effective he is, because he hones in on characterization. He hones in on character moments. What makes them special? What are they overcoming? And the bigger and more bombastic he gets as a writer, the sloppier it gets, the more untenable the idea gets, because it gets so out of hand, because it gets so large that basically he loses himself in the story, and then he can't really do anything about it because it gets so goddamn big. It's not even funny. See also The Batman Who Laughs. The worst villain introduced to DC Comics in the last decade. Not because the original concept was bad, because he made it so big by the end, it was fucking preposterous. And when I read that we're going to be learning that Darkseid had something missing all along, and when you get to the middle, you're going to get this explosive moment. And I'm going, oh God, what is he going to do now? And what's it going to destroy besides Darkseid himself? Is he going to break the Green Lantern Corps with this? Is he going to break Superman with it? Because he's going to come up with something so fucking outlandish and so silly that it almost implodes on himself. But it is cool that it's a flip book. So that's what you can expect from All In, a story that meets in the middle in an explosive moment that might be universe shattering in the wrong way. Somebody else asked him if we should expect to see the Justice League or Teen Titans in the Absolute Universe. This is what he said. We all agree, talking about himself, Jason Aaron, and Kelly Thompson, I believe, we should wait at least a year before they really interact to give each other room to establish itself. Also, the goal is to give you two very different things with the main you and the absolute you. Main universe now has everyone connected and working together via Justice League Unlimited. There's a feeling of togetherness there. In the absolute universe, everyone is isolated, just learning to stand. So I imagine you get teases, and he even mentions you're going to see Dick Grayson early on in the Absolute Batman comic book series, but he won't be Nightwing, he won't be Robin. It will be more like a cameo or an Easter egg. But eventually these characters will become apparent. Will they all come together for a Justice League or Teen Titans thing? I don't think so. I honestly don't think this is going to have the type of staying power. When I say this, I mean the Absolute Universe itself, because I do believe the concept behind Absolute Superman is really, really bad. The concept behind Absolute Wonder Woman is much, much better, but you have a really bad writer on it to where really you only have Absolute Batman really after 9 months being successful. I think you're going to see a lot of disinterest in it, which is something that we're seeing right now in the Marvel Comics Ultimate Universe. You know, everything started selling real hot and the sales were through the roof and all that stuff. And that's great. And that's what I believe will happen here. But now we're seeing interest in Ultimate X-Men really decreasing. Why? Because it's not an X-Men book. Well, what have we been told about Ultimate Superman? Not really a Superman book. And we're also seeing the interest in Ultimate Black Panther decrease. And that's actually selling much worse even than Ultimate X-Men, because it's kind of a boring take on Black Panther. And there's not really a lot of reason to read it unless you just want a Black Panther book. And that's certainly not been enough to really sustain the energy behind that like we've gotten for Spider-Man. And I believe the same thing will happen with the Ultimates itself, because it's a weird book. It's not very good. And I think all this stuff is going to be really, really weird. Getting the feeling that Al Ewing's Green Lantern book is going to be real strange. Maybe Jeff Lemire's Flash book has staying power. But even then, as much as I like Jeff Lemire and as much as he's respected in the industry, he's not really an A-lister. He can't really carry a book on his name alone. And then you see the Flash in the normal universe and it's doing so poorly, there probably isn't a lot of hope for a character like that right now. So we'll see what happens, but I don't expect to ever see like a full-up Absolute Justice League or a full-up Absolute Teen Titans series ever, because I don't think Absolute Universe is going to make it as a shared continuity long-term. I think Absolute Batman will, and that'll be it. Now, some people did ask about Nick Dragotta, the artist on Absolute Batman, an artist that I personally like a lot, and this is what he had to say about him coming aboard. Absolute Batman was the pitch I had as proof of concept for the Absolute line. It's what I used to explain the line to people. And Absolute Batman, for example, could work like this. And as all the books got creators on them, Batman was still open. It was James Tynion who called me to be like, you should do the Batman one. And I was like, I can't. But he encouraged me, being like, it was the pitch you love. So I decided basically that if Nick would do it, I'd do it. So I called him last summer. I was walking down our road all nervous, and he stopped me halfway through the pitch and was like, tell me you're offering me this with you, and here we are. And that is how Nick Dragotta came aboard as the artist on Absolute Batman, which I think is going to be great. Nick Dragotta is a very exciting artist. I believe he's done some work at DC, very minimal. He's done some work over at Marvel, but really he's been known for his indie work for basically like a decade now. And if you remember Skip and Tosh, a good friend of the channel, unfortunately passed away far too young. I love that guy. This was his favorite artist. And not only was Nick Dragotta Skip's favorite artist, they actually had a friendship. He's supposedly a really, really nice guy. Skip would always talk so nice about Nick and how friendly he was, you know, offering up images and all that kind of stuff, and just collaborating with him because they kind of lived in the same area. And I know Skip and Tosh had a very special place in his heart for Nick Dragotta. So therefore, Skip being so special to me, I've always had a special place in my heart for Nick Dragotta as well. So I'm hoping this does wonders for his reputation, his career. People that love comic books know Nick Dragotta kicks ass, but not everybody knows it yet. And I do think this will solidify his, standing. It's not just that really awesome indie artist. He's going to be that really awesome Batman artist. I think that's going to be really cool. Now, as far as calling Absolute Batman and explaining how it would work a proof of concept, I don't think that's how it works. I think that's just a concept. A proof of concept would be putting Absolute Batman into Batman Brave and the Bold and doing a 4-part like short story in there and seeing if sales increased or interest increased, or there were lots of people reaching out to DC. Are we going to get more Absolute Batman? That's proof of concept. You put it out there in a limited quantity and people react to it. It's like what Denny O'Neil did. And I believe Neil Adams, when they introduced Ra's al Ghul, they didn't know what they had there. They thought it was an interesting concept, but DC weren't exactly 100% behind it. So they put Ra's al Ghul in a story, and you didn't see him again for another like 9 months because it was proof of concept. And they realized people did, in fact, react to it. And they were like excited. Where's Ra's al Ghul? We want to see this character again. That's proof of concept. I don't think pitching is proof of concept, because you don't know if people ever bought into it. And also the story I hear is much different than that this has been percolating and boiling and something that Scott Snyder's been working on for at least 5 or 6 years. I don't think he ever was going to do anything other than Absolute Batman. Why would he put anybody else on there? I do understand when he said he did Last Night on Earth, that was his last Batman story ever. But doing Batman in an alternate universe that isn't really Batman is the easiest way around that in the history of the world. That's probably one of the reasons he was working on it, because he would have a way out of that kind of statement. So I think it was always going to be Scott Snyder. But I do think it's cool that Nick Dragotta is coming along, and I think he's going to add some real spice to the art, and he's going to make you feel something in there. Your nether regions are going to tingle when you see this Nick Dragotta Batman art, because he is a fantastic artist. The last thing I want to mention, not really enormous to the Absolute Universe, but did get me excited for hopefully one of the great DC Comics characters that's just completely underutilized. We never see him anymore, making a comeback. This is the exact question. Scott, do you ever plan on writing a Batman and Jarro miniseries or a short Batman and Jarro story in a book like The Brave and the Bold? Jarro got a huge chance to be DC's Baby Yoda, but it seems DC isn't able to recognize that. And Scott Snyder replied, "I will write Jarro again one day, I swear." Please do, sir. Literally, the last cool thing you ever introduced was fucking Jarro. A little mini Starospore that ends up falling in love with Batman, realizing he was hero, wanting to be hero himself, and trying to be Robin and calling Batman dad. It was all over the his Justice League series, where the Legion of Doom had almost like taken over the world. Jarro turns on him. He ends up joining the Justice League as the new Robin. And then it's probably the only really cool moment in Dark Knight's Death Metal is when Batman frees him from prison. He's like chipping rocks, and he's got like a stripe, like a prisoner suit on. It was absolutely great. And I love Jarro. We did get a recent story. It was like a short story. And I think the Ape Real Special, there are so many stupid DC anthology books out there that they kind of all mesh together. But I think in the DC Ape Real Special, you do get a Jarro like short story, but it's from like Joanne Stair or somebody that's completely incompetent and did not get why people like Jarro or why he's such a good character. But I do hope Scott Snyder comes back to that, because it's literally the last thing that he did that I really, really loved at DC Comics. I'm hoping I like Absolute Batman, but I've got a feeling it's not going to be the book for me, but I'm certainly going to check it out. Not just because I want to support this and see what's going on, but I definitely want to see the Nick Dragotta art. So there you go, wrapping up the Scott Snyder AMA from Reddit. Not a lot of new information regarding details about Absolute Batman and stuff like that, but we did get some behind-the-scenes stuff. I think it is a major misfire on the part of Scott Snyder to not have more oversight as the showrunner of Absolute Universe. This is going to be part of your reputation, not so much Kelly Thompson or Jason Aaron or Al Ewing or Dennis Camp's reputation. People are going to associate this with Scott Snyder, and you might want to think about that one, pal, because you probably don't want the stink of Absolute Superman, which you guys aren't going to believe when you see it, and you don't want that on you. You should have had more oversight and taken a more hands-on approach here, because it is a very crucial time in the part of DC Comics, and now wasn't the time to take a hands-off approach and see how they do on their own. because we know Jason Aaron's very destructive, and we know that Kelly Thompson is incredibly incompetent when it comes to writing comic books. But you also knew that, Scott, and you decided to let her cook anyway, and it's probably all going to fall on you because you're the boss. Everything rolls uphill, and you are the actual name to DC Comics fans, not Kelly, and certainly not Jason Aaron as well. There are a few things percolating around Scott Snyder's Absolute Batman, most notably a lot of making fun of the enormous logo. I actually had a video about that, discussing the logo, why it was stupid, how this could all play out. If you haven't checked this out, there's an awesome video right here, having fun with this, pointing out the obvious that people hate this logo.